right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Let me know if you can all hear me. I'm trying a different chat view, before we get started kind of thing. Let's just kind of zoom in and talk a little bit, and then I'm going to try to build out some other views as well, but good. Sounds clear, nice and good. Cool. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to SOC 100. Good to have everyone over here again. Another Sunday. Today's definitely an extra coffee day. Today, absolutely KS. Today's coffee. What did we call it? Something like slow start Sundays. I think it was. I think like a couple weeks back. But Sundays is definitely the day where we need a little bit more caffeine to get things going. But most importantly, you're all here again today. That's what matters. Just showing up and doing the work. So good to have everyone here. Hope everyone's doing well. Low battery Sundays. That's what we call it. Right. Nice. Low battery Sundays. Cool. So who do we got in chat over here? All right. Abe, Doug, Joe, Karina, KS, Alan, Ariel, Bearded, CI, Chrome Knight's back. Demorier, IT. We got Jacopo's in the house. Kim Fried, RTS, Cyber Saiyan, and TomTom. Nice little morning start to the crew. Wings prepped and marinating. Near time for the Buffalo game. NFL Sundays. Nice, yeah. Blackhammer's back, fell behind both you guys today. Yeah, all good. Don't feel like you need to be 100% every single stream, you know? A lot of the benefit is just actually being here, involved, absorbing what you can, like the live engagement, chatting with others, asking questions that come up. That's more of the benefit, and ideal, sure, if you can catch up on every single stream, then amazing, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. Ariel just grinded some beans. Cool. What kind of beans? Caviera, that's right, consistency. Absolutely. Yeah, I expect as much coffee beans, Ariel, but I mean, what kind of roast, I should say. A more specific question. Like a dark roast, light roast. Light roast. Light roast actually has the most caffeine compared to dark roast. So, I see where you're going. Yep. Yeah, see, I used to be a barista back in the day. Made a whole ton of coffee. Coffee. Ariel, you're making green beans part of dinner? Big bean Sunday going on over there. Nice. Cool. Tom, what lights do I use? The ones like those two? Kind of, wait. Yeah, that one and this one. Like those two up there? Yeah. They are just, I'll get the link for you. Got them on sale back on, what was it? I think Black Friday, Cyber Monday is when I grabbed them. They're light bars. I think from Govey is the brand. Let me double check. Yeah, there you go. Govey light bars. You can change the color as much as you want. You can control them. They're Wi-Fi. I just haven't actually put them on the app yet, but yeah, you can set them to what you want. It makes a difference, like the way the light hits you when you're on the camera, is if there's light in the background, it does something to like the general picture, like it provides a better focus from what I was able to figure out. Because if the lights aren't back there, it actually kind of makes you look like a little fuzzy. It doesn't actually like focus as well for whatever reason. Haven't figured out like the light reasoning for that. I feel like there's a lot of bend going on in this cable. Yeah, you're a big lamp lights person. Oh yeah, overhead lights are the worst. Like just the worst. Like you get tons of glare, and it doesn't look good on any camera. I do not like overhead lights at all myself. I keep them all off too. So I've got a front light and back lights, and then I've got like general lights in the rest of the place. But yeah, I agree with you. Nice, cool. Well, we've got a really good stream today. Bearded says, Neuromancer arrives today. Yes. So you grabbed it. Yeah, we were chatting last night. Yeah. Yeah, Doug. You're still in chat, right, Doug? Yeah. So I wasn't gonna hop on voice on Discord last night, but I was wrapping up work and I was like, all right. I'm just gonna. I saw a couple of the crew over there hanging out. I'm like, all right. I'm just gonna hop in, just chill out for a little bit before I hop over to bed. But it was pretty cool. Was hanging out with a couple of them, and we had a good little discussion around books and such. You haven't seen my bad side, Ariel. That's why. That's why. Yeah, Neuromancer came up. Awesome book. We talked about general like cybersecurity podcasts, books, lore, stories, and things. Good discussion. Really cool to hang out. We got to start doing more of that. Yeah, it was good Yeah, good convo. I know what you're talking about, Doug. There's no side. That's what. You want to watch Seinfeld? Remember? There's a side. Yeah, you have a side. Worry 3 a.m. your local time, not a good time for hanging out. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna. I don't know. We'll have some like midday hangouts, I think, so that everyone can get involved and just kind of chill out and do things. Just come hang out, play some games, or do some studying on the side, be part of the conversation, all that good stuff. Put power shots right. That's right. We're gonna put PowerShell right at the beginning. How late did you all stay up? Like, because I hopped out, but it looks like a lot of you just like kept on going. Sandworm is a good book. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good about that. Rootkit Arsenal, interesting. Maybe we should have like a book club. That'd be kind of cool. Kind of like share and talk about books, what we're all reading. It's 11:30 Central. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice. 2 a.m. when Karina fell asleep. Karina's passed out. Yeah. Be fresh for the live stream. Good times. Yeah, just hanging out in Discord until you pass out. I've definitely done that once or twice. Is Chrome still around? Yeah, Chrome's still here. Yeah. Nice. Chrome knows. Just hanging out. Playing some vids, playing some games forever, and then just pass out. Gonna be on tonight. I might be, we'll see. I was not gonna go on last night and then just hang out tonight. But now that I hung out last night, I don't know, we'll see. But I don't know. I really do want to hop back on PoE too. So we'll see. We'll see. But cool. Okay. So SOC 100. Let's start getting back to things over here. That's enough jibber jabber. Some good banter. Start the day. So SOC 100. We are back today with cryptography. We're going to wrap that up. We have asymmetric encryption to finish off. We've also got a look at digital certificates, and finally we're going to talk about Cyberchef. So we're going to use a very professional level tool to be able to work with a basically like a recipe cookbook approach to working with encryption, decryption, encoding, decoding, ciphering, etc. So really cool tool. We're going to talk about that. We're going to go through that today too. And then we're going to hop into the Windows Triage module. And forewarning, that one is going to be a little complex at first. So hopefully you're on your second, third, or fourth, or fifth coffee by early afternoon. So let's get to it. So we'll switch over to the study view. All right, cool. iPad's working, nice. Ariel thought PoE was power. Yeah, I know. Power over Ethernet too. That'd be a pretty fun game. Like you got to get over the wire. Okay. So let's do this. Get the stream and everything out of the way. All right. So today we're at January 12th. So we're going to be over here. We're going to kind of wrap things up. We're back over in SOC 100-2, and last night we left over things on symmetric encryption. So I'm going to power on my Linux workstation. And for those of you that aren't using the course VMs, and if you have something on your own, just as you go, if you're missing a tool, I hope that you've been able to follow along the Linux module to be able to go in and install it if you're missing a library or something like that to that end. So just keep that in mind as we go. So yeah, last night we left over at ciphers and symmetric encryption. So I'll kind of just like hop back in the tail end of that lab for today and talk a little bit about where we left off, where we actually we encrypted, we encoded, decoded, and then decrypted a message and demonstrated the process in action. So we actually had zero loss for that manner. In integrity, I should say. Not just zero loss for the hell of it. Okay. Give that a go. Not connected yet. Do a little refresh. Nothing yet. All right. While that's cooking in the background, so we are starting on the lab asymmetric encryption as soon as we're done with a little bit of a review on the previous lab. Okay, there we go. Cool. All right, let's hop in. Oh, there we go. Cool. Zoom in a little bit. Nice. All right, so where were we yesterday? Nice. Okay, so the first command that we had ran last night was we used the OpenSSL library to encrypt using AES-128 ECB as the suite. We fed it a key. We had some plain text go in, and that plain text came out as ciphertext. So if we were to do cat plaintext.txt, we could see what we actually wrote inside of that. And then we had some ciphertext that came out from that. And so the ciphertext was the encrypted text after we used a symmetric key to run a single encryption on the file itself. So this is what it looks like at the end. Completely unreadable, a lot of unknown characters. This is about as impossible to read as you can get. Now, what we did after that, Board Tool, thanks for the follow. Thanks for being here. Then what we did after that is we demonstrated to do the opposite, so the reverse. Okay, so this line over here. So we use the same library over here through an attack D flag, so we could work with decryption. Cool. Thanks for the bits, Board. Nice. Cybersecurity streams are a rare breed. Yes, they are. Cool. You're the first bit cheer, by the way. Thank you for that. Yes, they are. Cybersecurity streams are definitely a rare breed, but thanks for being here, Board. Thanks for supporting the stream. So we went ahead, we did an OpenSSL library action over here. We threw in attack D to decrypt to this same key. So that's the concept of symmetric encryption. One key to encrypt, same key to decrypt. So we actually fed in our ciphertext and we had an output of decrypted text, and we were able to demonstrate that it was the exact same. So there was zero loss. And we also did an MD5 sum to show the plain text, and also an MD5 sum to show the decrypted text as well too, just so that we can demonstrate that the integrity of the file had zero loss going through this process. So it is a full encryption of the original state, a full decryption, bring it back to the original state with zero effective loss at that point in time. So, and you saw just like it goes really, really fast. And that's the power of symmetric encryption. And this is the backbone of how everything works. After we've established the TCP handshake to establish an orderly and reliable connection with structure and understanding sequence, then we had the TLS handshake we covered yesterday. We were able to demonstrate how the public key exchange happened to then establish a session key, which is this. So that session key that we're then encrypting all of our traffic back and forth with one another, that only the client and server understand, is doing this. It's effectively running a command similar to this, where we have the client data being encrypted, sent over the wire that no one can read because it looks like this. Like when it's going over the wire, you're effectively looking at things like this. Like you cannot read it. Then when it's received on the server's end, the server does another function that looks kind of like this statement, where we're then decrypting it with that shared session key. And then you can go ahead and get the exact same data from the beginning to the end. So cool. 89, thanks for the sub as well too. Sweet. Thanks for the support. Looks like we got a little hype train going on too. Nice. Okay, and then so just to demonstrate that, so we covered the concept of hashes yesterday, being that one-way function, which is essentially an output that is a representation, sort of like your fingerprint, like a thumbprint, or a piece of something that is not the whole and cannot be reversed. And it's an ability to have an output like this, which again is kind of like your fingerprint, like I said. And then that lets us know that it hasn't changed. So the input of the plain text hash over here as an MD5 hash is this output, sorry, with the 6 as well. And then the decrypted text as well is the same hash. So just kind of covering a little bit where we left things off with last night. So nice. KS saying variable input plus hash equals fixed output. Yes, sir. Always going to be the same. And you need the whole input to be able to do this. So It's not like we just took a snippet of the first piece of the text. We didn't just hash the first thing, we hashed the entire thing. We also demonstrated that the file name didn't matter. It's the data. It's the data within the file and not the file name that sits kind of above the data structure. So cool. Very, very cool. That's kind of where we left things off. And then we also did... we also demonstrated how base64 encoding works. So we'll go through that again. Base64. So what we did in this statement is we catted the ciphertext, which was this line, right? Like this impossible to read encrypted piece of data. And then we piped that to base64, which provided a base64 encoded version of that. Which looks like this. So the base64 output of this ciphertext is this text right over here. Okay? And remember that encoding is more about compatibility and preventing the situation or scenario where we might have characters that can't be interpreted, like all these question marks or backslashes or forward slashes, or characters that might get lost in translation from a client to a server or between two endpoints. So what we do is we wrap it inside some type of encoding language like base64, and there are many others, to excuse me, need a little bit of water. Can't choke a little bit right there. So we wrapped it inside of base64 encoding to be able to provide it a reliable level of characters that shouldn't get lost or messed up with in transit. So this is a concept of data in transit, and this is where encoding is going to provide you a reliable means of ensuring integrity. Because again, integrity being trust, we don't want to get any loss or or degrading, I should say. So loss or degrading of the data in any shape or form when it moves. So that's where encoding comes into place. And then we also demonstrated So then we also demonstrated this line over here where we base64 decoded this entire string. Which looks like this. Oh, sorry. We also did... One second over here. Let me go back to it. So it's not that one. It was base64 encoded. Here you go. Yes. So we base64 decoded this string over here, which we outputted as decoded but still encrypted data. Okay. And oh, that's right. I overwrote that, didn't I, last night? Okay. Anyways, what we did over here was we decoded the string, which turned it back into this, and then we used that decoded but still encrypted data to go back through another decoding, another decrypting statement over here, which ultimately provided the exact same text as the original plain text. And we also demonstrated that the hash didn't change again in that sequence as well too. So what we could have done there was md5 sum plaintext.txt, and also do this on the decoded, this one right over here, and we can see that the final result stayed the same with the hash as well too. So plain text to, you know what I'll do? I'll do this. So we had plain text to encrypted and then we had encrypted to encoded, and I'll say base64, Yeah, looks like it's still working. Yeah, good. And then we had decoded to still encrypted. So this section right over here was effectively data in transit. Okay, it's pretty hard to read, isn't it? Let's do this. Data in transit. Okay. And then we had still encrypted to decrypted, which ultimately, so this was ultimately equal to that. So plain text and decrypted was equal to one another. There was zero loss. So through this entire exchange of what happened, there was zero loss. And that's to say, hash both hashes match. And that is the point, and that's why we have these functions and these things that happen throughout all this process. So the hash was to get an idea of a trusted output, so like a signature, like a fingerprint, like a piece or representation of the entirety of the data. And we compare that hash from the beginning to the end of this entire process. And through this process, if the hash matches at the end and the beginning, we know that we had zero loss through all of this. That's what we're doing. So that's why we did everything yesterday. That's what we talked about. And this is why we have these terms today. So Beaver Logic 2, does it truly matter whether the text is base 64 or some say ASCII format because the data being transferred should be regardless in bytes? It does, yeah. So like the problem here is if we have things like backslashes, or if we have things like forward slashes, or like \n, or you know, like anything along these things that could be represented as characters or brackets, like semicolons, colons. These are all registered and structured or expected characters in various languages that can be interpreted by software or network services to execute code or to interpret shell commands, amongst many other things. So when you have characters like this, which could appear inside of some type of output, right? Like here's the binary, here's the encrypted text over here of our ciphertext, right? And we have a backslash here. That's a problem. We also have a square bracket. We also have a semicolon. So, bit of a problem. We can't, and we don't want to transfer those types of characters going over the wire because, like I said, that could be misinterpreted. That could make a service completely error out. Developers could have put escape character sanitization, etc. Beaver Logic 2, I don't get this part. The bytes should never be executed. Well, they won't. They won't unless they're structured in a certain way. Agent saying, how am I not on... What link were you trying to share, Agent? infosecstreams.com. I'll get back to you in a second over there, Beaver. Let me just take a look at this. What is InfoSec Streams? I have never heard of this before, by the way. Sorry. So Beaver, the bytes, they never get executed, but they could be dropped. That's the problem. So when we are, put it this way, when we're transferring data, like text, images, etc., we're not transferring executable instructions, but what we're transferring is formatted text. So bytes that are formatted and interpreted. Now that's the problem. It's not about execution because there isn't a compiler and there isn't an operating system living over inside of the internet itself, right? Like the TCP/IP model through the various layers doesn't have an operating system. It doesn't have memory. It doesn't have kernel. It doesn't have any of that. So the bytes themselves cannot be executed through any means of those transmissions. It doesn't happen that way. The problem is when we receive the bytes on the other end, the computer still will not execute those unless there are certain things like we've learned about like the PE header that we can see, which provides like a little snippet of text and says this must be executed in DOS mode, etc. And if you perform a GET request to download that, it's still not executing itself within the network transmission. It only executes once it gets onto disk, and then an executable when it starts, it has a process start header somewhere along there to instantiate a Windows process. That's the longer answer. So you don't have to worry about things being executed. That's not the problem. The problem is when we're transferring bytes from one endpoint to another that could look like code or could look like things. The browser, the web app, the operating system, the firewall, the antivirus, the EDR, you name it. There are so many things in the way that looks at those things and just to be safe will snippet them off or break them off or flat out error out. That's what we don't want to happen. And that's when we could have an integrity issue. Does that make more sense? So going back to agent in the meantime as well too, infosecstreams.com. I'll take a look. I've never heard of this before, to be honest. Pretty cool. So agent, do I have to like, do I reach out to someone to get on this, or like how does that work? And then in the meantime, so Beaver, so things like HTTP requests are literally ASCII though? Correct. Yes. Like that's it. That's all that they are. But that's the problem, is that's when like an HTTP request is formatted in a certain way to interpret ASCII to be like get index.html or something, right? We're expecting that to be part of part of the HTTP protocol to perform a specific action with a web app and a browser, etc. Like we need to know that those characters are reserved for those types of things. But if we're transmitting data that could mess up the interpretation of that, well, the browser is going to drop it. That's the problem. So we need to encode it somewhere along the way so that those characters are removed into a safe, reliable, compatible format. And that's where you get like URL encoding, UTF-8, base64. You get encoding to cover those circumstances. And then on the other end, they're decoded and then interpreted and executed as needed. Kim saying, I wonder why MD5 is still used without salting, why everyone uses Shanti fix. Yeah, ease, reliability, simple, size. Some people are also not overly, they don't really care too much about collisions. Because they're not really too concerned about data being, like their hashes ever being exposed. It's just, but it's not a good practice. So by all means, where possible, use the best hash or the best encryption algorithm where you can. Also like legacy reasons too. Like if you have old software that hasn't been upgraded to support future-proofed cipher suites and encryption algorithms, it may not actually be able to support later and more modern protocols. So that's also a reason too. So agents, I can do a pull request, add yourself. Cool, yeah, I'll do that. I'll take a look. Thanks for sharing that. Agent 57 clicking, yeah, okay, cool. Newman makes sense, cool. Beaver for the record, just so you know. Nice, math major, cool. Okay, so you know probably way more than I do about mathematics and algorithms then. So you're doing a lower degree thesis on discrete algorithm, have to get some proofs, know the basics and how the groups fields work, etc. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so you probably have a better understanding than I do of like the actual mathematics and the formula behind it, how the encryption's actually working. We're not going into like a super deep level, like breaking down the mathematical formula. It's interesting, but kind of like we talked about yesterday, for intents and purposes, like we're trying to train SOC analysts to be effective at a tier 1 and 2 level where they need to understand the conceptual meaning and purpose of these types of technologies, but not necessarily the nitty-gritty deep logic underneath, like how they're actually working at a function level, unless they're interested. So we're not going to go too much into like breaking down the formula itself. But I would love, Beaver, if you can, I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure you're in the Discord, right? Drop it inside there. If you have any notes or any like studies or observations of how you've interpreted the mathematics behind algorithms that support all this, that'd be amazing. I think people would appreciate that. I'd be curious to read it too. Cool. Okay, so let's go. We're going to move on to the next portion then. So we have the next lab over here is asymmetric encryption. So we're going to walk through that as well too and talk a little bit about what's going on over here. This one's where it gets a little bit more complex. This is where the key exchange happens, right? Okay. All right. Let me just get my instructions on another tab so I don't have to keep tabbing back and forth for y'all. Nice. Okay, cool. Okay. So let's clear that up. Beaver Logic. Let's see, you're here for the motivation. Well, we've got some real motivated students over here. So I'm pretty sure you're going to find a pretty good crew to hang out with. As you can see, Karina's over there motivated to hear what you can do as well too, just as I am. We like to nerd out about stuff when we can, but we're also moving along trying to deliver the SOC 100 curriculum too, so we can't spend too much time in rabbit holes. As much as we like rabbit holes. But yeah, it's cool if you're not so much into the security portion. We're going to cover that soon. So anyways, let's kick things back off. Last thing we need to do is trail off too much. So first steps first. We're going to go ahead, kind of what we did yesterday. We are going to generate a... we're going to generate keys now at this point. So we're going to run a command over here, generate p key. And we're going to specify the algorithm. And we're going to go specify the algorithm RSA. Tac out, and we're going to actually generate our private key at this point. Private key.pem. Okay, so I should say, where is my private key? Cool, so here it is. So let's take a look at this thing. So we can see pretty small size. And just for my lazy brain right now, we're looking at 1.7K. The instructions... the permissions you can see over here immediately is isolated to the owner. So there's an immediate set of privacy that's assumed and understood. So this is not accessible to anyone else other than us. Let's take a look at what a key looks like. And as you can see over here, what does this look like? We talked about this yesterday. What does that look like right there? Agent, no probs, buddy. Lurked for a while before you followed, and then I knew you had to make you aware. Thanks, man. Has lots of attention from the community, and they will now know who you are, be able to find you too. Cool. That's pretty cool. I was on your recommended channels. Interesting. You saw Windows Triage Cryptography, and then was intrigued. Yeah, cool. Bearded saying the name of the mug. Yeah, Demore Base 64. Yes, yes. Zeno Base 64. Yes, yes. Right? Base 64. What's a telltale sign? How'd you know that? We talked about that yesterday. Right. The padding. Padding at the end. So. Cool. So this format, privacy enhanced mail, right? Isn't that's the format of PEM? PEM file name meaning privacy. Yeah, privacy enhanced mail. Yes. Okay. Yes. So PEM format, kind of a standard format. You're going to see this everywhere, especially for those of you that haven't seen this at all before. You're going to see these PEM keys in just about everywhere when it comes to public key cryptography. And again, remember formatting. What's that for? Compatibility, reliability, and integrity of getting data from one point to another. So data in transit. That's what we're trying to do over here. Now, what can we do? Let's just do a little copy. We're going to say copy the private key to demo.pem for now, okay? And I'm going to go inside of demo.pem. And I am going to trim off, okay? I'm going to trim off the header, okay? Because I want just the base 64 text itself over there. Now, what I can do is I can do a little base 64 tac d demo.pem. So take a look. Here's an example again. So the symmetric key that we use didn't necessarily look like this, and neither did the encrypted text. So this is why we encode things. Imagine trying to get this over the wire. Look at all the unsupported characters. Look at all of the potential code execution or path traversal or directory traversal, etc. There's so many different things that could go wrong here. And again, this is going to break the protocol's ability to understand things like HTTP, SMB, FTP, like you name it. Whatever type of request we're trying to make, these characters are potentially going to break things. And then developers are also going to add another layer of security to sanitize this output because they don't want to deal with things that could be like SQL injection, etc. So what does the key actually look like, especially when we move things around? A nice, reliable base 64 encoded format. So you can expect like base 64 to be just about everywhere. CI, which lab is this? We're doing lab asymmetric encryption. That's what we're doing right now. So we're just kind of going through this, and we're going to demonstrate the public key cryptography kind of things. All right, so I'm not going to work with that demo PEM. I'm still going to work with the private key. So what do we need to do next? We actually need to generate our public key. We generate our public key from our private key. And we're going to use the OpenSSL library again to be able to achieve this. We need to specify RSA, pub out, and we're going to do our tac in over here for our private key. And we want to tac out of public key. Again, same format. Nice, easy. Okay, so cat public key. Same kind of concept. You can see it's significantly less in size. And again, more base 64 encoding. And if we were to decode this, you would see something similar to this as well too. Just like weird junk going on inside there. So let's go ahead and now let's work with some data. So we saw the symmetric way to do this, right? And kind of looking back on this, symmetric, we had our plain text, we encrypted it. The encrypted was then encoded, decoded, still encrypted, and then we had our still encrypted to decrypted afterwards. So kind of that whole sequence of events. So let's take a look. Let's do echo. This is data I will encrypt with the public public key. Message.txt. Let's put that inside there. Cat that just so we can see, make sure it's looking good. Nice. Cool. So in real applications, what did we learn about this from the TLS handshake yesterday? What did we encrypt with the public key? Y'all remember? Like when we had the exchange? The SATA? What are you talking about over there, CIA? Remember this? Data. No. We're not encrypting the data yet. Remember the key exchange. What did we need to do? We needed to encrypt, what was it over here? Our pre-master secret. So Alice, so the client, what happened was Bob provided his public key, this. Okay? Bob provided his public key, this thing right here. This message, I should say. Clear screen. This. Okay? That is what Bob shared to Alice. Alice then generated a pre-master secret. She then encrypts it with this key, and then she's going to send it over to Bob. Now, Bob's the only one who can read this piece of data because he has the private key. So let's kind of demonstrate what that looks like. So to be able to do something like this, first we need to do like OpenSSL, RSA utility, RSA, if I can type there, RSA util, encrypt. We're going to do pub in. Need more coffee today. Pub in key, public key, tack in. So here's the message. So you know what? Actually, for better demonstration, I'm gonna actually change this to pre-master secret. Okay, .txt. So let's just do this together. This will make a little bit more sense as we do it. RSA utilities, encrypt, pub in key, public key, and tack in would be pre-master secret. Okay? Cool. And I didn't write tack out, did I? Okay. So sorry about that. I got too into it. Like I said, I think it's going to be another coffee in a moment. Okay. So what are we doing over here? Alice is writing her pre-master secret. Okay, this is something over here. And then she's going to run a command like this. We're going to say encrypted pre-master secret.txt. Okay. So we're going to do this, and we're going to cat that now. So this is kind of what happens inside of this exchange over here, okay? This on the screen that you can see, this is what Alice is doing. She's encrypting her pre-master secret with Bob's public key. And what it looks like on the command line, for demonstration purposes, as I should say, this is not exact replication of what's actually happening. But for demonstration purposes, this is essentially what's happening, and then programmed by developers to be handled in different ways to develop the browser and etc. So Alice has her pre-master secret. Her client, is going to run the OpenSSL command or something to run an encryption using Bob's public key. Okay, run one right here, and it's going to take in the pre-master secret, and then the output is going to be an encrypted pre-master secret that is going to be sent over to Bob. Now, no one can read this right now because if they were to try, excuse me, geez, this is what it looks like. This is why you have the public key exchange over here in step 6, as we covered yesterday, because we need both parties to have this pre-master secret in order to blend it later together using a key derivation function. If someone else gets this pre-master secret, then they could probably try to replicate the formula and then get in the middle, or like a man-in-the-middle attack or something. We don't want that. It's bad. Okay. So, Bob receives this now. All right. Bob is then going to run something like an OpenSSL RSA utilities, decrypt, attack in key. He's going to use his private key now. Okay. And he's going to take in the data, which is encrypted, pre-master secret, and attack out, decrypted pre-master secret.txt. Yeah. Okay. Bob then gets this and has Alice's pre-master secret now. That's how this happens. Now, what Bob is going to do and what Alice is going to do after this, right? Kind of going back to here. And this is what happened here, by the way, on this diagram. This exchange that you're seeing here, where the pre-master secret goes in, is encrypted by Bob's public key and then gets out on the other end, and Bob decrypts it. That's what you just happened to see on the command line as well. And from here on, we've established perfect forward secrecy, that if anything were to change, we'd have a problem. This is where everything is expected to be secure from here on out. And if it is, we have a very bad problem happening. So again, at this point in time, Bob and Alice now have the pre-master secret. They have the client random and the server random that we talked about yesterday that they both also shared prior to this. That's part of the TLS handshake. They blend that. They make a nice, good smoothie. They enjoy it. And out of this, they start pouring out what they need, which one of them is the symmetric key, which we demonstrated earlier in action. This is what makes the internet go round. Matt Flash, thanks for the follow. Oh, Agent, you followed too. Thanks for that, man. Or did I say things already? But does that make sense? Okay. Does that give you a better insight of what's actually happening there under the hood? I hope so. Or is it coffee break time? Thanks, Agent. We've got Agent's vote of confidence. Nice. Okay, cool. Nice and clear. That's it. That's all what's happening under the hood. Karina, you need to review sort of that exchange. What do you need to review? Oh, okay, I see. You kind of need to like visually walk through it, yeah. Okay. Cool. Makes sense, yeah. So, like I said, not going... it's a lot of terms and definitions, right? Like when you're brand new, like kind of looking at this stuff. So quick little recap then. Sure, others are probably kind of thinking the same. What's happened here is Alice and Bob wanted to have a secure conversation in a crowded room. And in order to do this, it starts off with public key cryptography, where we have a public and a private key. And that's this notion over here, where public key encrypts data as it goes in, and the private key decrypts it as it goes out. Now, that's not enough, because in order to establish perfect forward secrecy, that's the concept here, both parties, both Alice and Bob, need to have a secret that no one else knows. That's how you can begin generating an additional key that they're both going to then share, or sorry, they're both going to use to encrypt everything afterwards using symmetric encryption. This is why this exchange happens. This is that Diffie-Hellman exchange that we're talking about. In order for two parties to both have a secret piece of information that they can then both use to run through an algorithm that can then generate a symmetric key that they'll never share and no one will ever know, but they can both encrypt and decrypt data with, they need to be able to do an exchange like this. And it starts with a pre-master secret. So Alice is going to ask for Bob to provide her his public key that can encrypt data and that he can only read afterwards by decrypting it with his private key that he doesn't share with anyone. So Alice generates a secret. She is the one. She generates the secret. Now, Alice is then going to encrypt this secret with Bob's public key. At this point, all she needs to do then is simply hand Bob the encrypted secret. Bob can then read it with his private key. At this point, only Alice and only Bob now have a secret piece of information that no one has. They then take that pre-master secret, along with some random data that they just kind of threw in there beforehand, the client and server random. At this point, Bob and Alice both use cryptography, a cryptographic algorithm, to be able to blend this all together and then output a couple pieces of information that they can both use to then encrypt data on their own endpoint and then send it anywhere they want and no one can ever read it, except for the other party. Does that make more sense? Sweet. Okay, cool. Alrighty. It is then, therefore, coffee break time. I'm going to go through on the be right back. Okay, let's take a little bit of a breather. Okay, okay. Cool. All right, we're back. A little bit earlier. What we're going to look at next. Agent, thank you for the stream. Enjoy the rest of your day, buddy. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing. That's an awesome resource. We're going to be back every weekend until at least March, and then we're going to be doing even more streams in between then. We're going to keep on advancing, by the way, Agent. We're going to actually keep moving along the SOC 100 course that we have. So you can take a look at that over at Level Effect. We're in SOC 100-2, but we're going to keep on moving. We're still on our SOC Tier 1 Analyst course series that we're instructing live. But yeah, going to get ourselves added to that stream, so I appreciate that. Cool. Nice, thanks, Agent. Well, have a good rest of your day. We'll see you next time. So next we're going to take a look at the digital certificate, and that's what actually contains, this is how the public key gets over to Alice. So quick kind of recap as well too is if you're having a little bit trouble trying to think about the Diffie-Hellman exchange, because there's a lot of terms and definitions in the way of your head, it's a lot of new things, right? Like symmetric this, asymmetric that, hash that, algorithm this. So we can simplify this for a moment. And imagine for a moment you were at a party with a friend. And this is where Bob and Alice are, right? And imagine you wanted to start speaking a language that only you and your friend knew, because maybe you didn't want other people to know what you guys were saying. And you wanted to just come up with a simple message. So what you would do is maybe you could approach your friend, and the friend is going to say to you, okay, I'm going to give you a piece of paper, open it up, write down a word to add to the end of everything you say. And it could be whatever. It could just be the word the that you can add to everything you say to really throw people off. So you write it in the note, you close the note, you give it to your friend, and then you walk away. No one saw what you put inside the note. And then your friend goes in the corner, opens it up and reads it, and then puts it back in their pocket. Your friend and you now know to add the word the to everything you say, which is really going to throw people off. And that's a really, really poor form of encryption, if you will, because it's changing what you're trying to say. It's changing the plain text into a ciphertext. And you could say whatever. You instead of adding the word the, you could rotate the characters, right? 13 positions, which is a ROT13 cipher, a symmetric key, if you will. Same concept. Once the two of you have established something private that only you know, you could then factor that into whatever other secret you want to come up with. And then you have perfect forward secrecy at that point. Hope that kind of makes more sense too. Cool. Okay. All ready? Everyone ready? Let's take a look at the next lab. We're going to move over now to digital signatures and certificates. It's weird that it says resume or resume. I don't remember that being there before. Might have been a copy-paste typo. I'll check back in on that. Okay, so moving on to the next lab over here. And what we're going to be doing is a similar type of approach where we're going to, again, deal with public and private keys. Thanks, Karina. I need to get more used to looking at the Stream Deck now, like pressing the button over and over and over again to turn it off, as opposed to always tilting my head. So I need to put that like higher, maybe. Okay, so we're going to be looking at digital signatures and certificates now. And this is going to be using, again, public key cryptography to be able to achieve this, where we have a public key we're going to give to someone and a private key. Now, what we're going to be doing here in this lab is we're actually going to be able to, we're going to demonstrate the concept of signing that certificate with the private key, which makes it irrefutable at that point, so long as you trust whoever has the private key. That's the difference. So Bob could have given Alice the public key, right? But what's to say that someone else just didn't give Alice a public key in the meantime, and then Alice got confused and used someone else's key to encrypt the message, which they then took and got in the way. And this is where we have the concept of digital certificates. It's another step in the process to ensure that Alice got not only a public key, but she got it from the right person. And this is where we get authenticity. So this is the final piece of the puzzle to make this all work. So let's walk through this and actually demonstrate how this actually works. Let me know, by the way, if like my audio is doing any kind of weird things with the mic. I've heard like a couple weird audio glitches. I don't know what that is. So let me know, everyone, please, if you hear something weird. Okay. Alrighty. Sounds great. Okay, cool. Yeah, all right. So let me know if anything. All right. So we're going to make a directory here, and we're going to do digital certificates just to get like a new fresh set of stuff. Too many files in the way. So we're going to go ahead and do OpenSSL. Same thing as before. We're going to do a generate public key, so generate P key, algorithm, RSA, tack out, private key dot pem. Same thing. Okay. And then we're going to do OpenSSL, RSA, pub out. So now we're going to generate our public key, tack in, private key, tack out, public key.pem. So same thing. So at this point in time, and this is what any of you could do on your Linux workstation, or as long as you've installed OpenSSL, like on Windows, it doesn't matter. If you were to do something like this, you could then give your public key to your friend, and your friend could give you their public key, and then the two of you can exchange whatever you want at that point. Seriously, you now have like the most encrypted channel in the world, so long as you have each of your private keys that no one else has. Like, no one else can get your private keys, and if you can do that, you can put your public key anywhere. So like, for example, if I were to like cat this public key, and if I were to transfer this out safely, right? If I were to take this and give this to you, or give you this file, and you knew how to work with it, you could then run these OpenSSL encrypt commands to encrypt whatever you want. Then you can send it directly to me, and only I will be able to read it. So at this point, we've already established like the most secure form of encryption and decryption. The problem is now, how do I make sure that you are getting my public key and I'm getting your public key? And this is where we get certificates. So I'm going to say echo digitally signed message by your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man message.txt. Okay. Let's take a look at that. Simple. Little message inside there. Now what we're going to do, first to demonstrate here, is we're going to demonstrate signing this. Okay. We're going to sign this message. Because before we can get to the certificate process, we want to demonstrate the concept of signing something first with a private key. So if I were to do a command now of OpenSSL, or digest, we're going to use digest SHA-256. So we're going to use the SHA-256 hash of, that's what we're going to use, the function. And then we're going to sign it with our private key. And then we're going to use tac out. We're going to use a signature .bin. So this is creating a binary signature file. It's a little bit, this is a new thing. And we're going to sign message.txt with it now. Okay. So what's happened here is we have created a couple different files. We've created a SHA-256 hash of the message, which acts as a unique fingerprint. We've signed it then with our private key. And the binary file here, signature.bin, is going to contain this signed hash. Okay? So let's demonstrate verification. If I did OpenSSL, digest SHA-256, verify using the public key, now, like my private public key. So I'm going to verify this now with the public key. Signature. Signature.bin. So this is the binary signature for message.txt. Verified OK. So a mathematical function has happened here where it's taken our message that was cryptographically signed using our private key, and a SHA-256 hash was created and put inside of the signature.bin file. Now to verify this, to verify that message.txt is the correct file, that nothing has been tampered with it, we can run a verification command where we're going to specify the hashing function of SHA-256 again. And we're going to specify that we want to use the resulting matching public key pair. The matching public key to the private key. So it's a pair. And we're going to specify where the digital signature lives, and then we're going to run it against this file. And the algorithm will tell us at this point, through a lot of mathematical calculations, and a little bit of this is like magical stuff happening in the background, and I appreciate that. That's why it's a little bit hard to grasp at first. So just understand that this is a function that is verifying using the same concepts that we already discussed, where public key is used to encrypt, private key is used to decrypt. It's just using those same concepts again. And in this case, we've signed a message, like we've created a hash of the message.txt, but then signed it with our private key. And we then need our public key as the resultant pair in the mathematical functions that are underneath all this to say, okay, well, yes, this was signed by that private key because I'm the public key and I can verify, and it's kind of like two pieces of a puzzle coming together for verification. Now, let's demonstrate if this file was tampered with. If I said tampered with, and I appended this to message.txt. And actually, let me show you something first, sorry. If I cat this message, it's not encrypted right now. Okay? All what I did is I created a hash. And it's inside here. It's signed. It's a signed hash that you can't read yet. You need the public key to be fed with a function, which will then calculate some things and look for the hash and verify that it matches with the private key. So, if I were to now go and say echo tampered with, and I'm going to append it to message.txt, you can see I've added some things to it. So I can still read it. Let's go back now to the verification step. Verification failure. Why? When this function tries to calculate the hash now of this file, not only has the hash changed, but the hash is a new hash that was not signed with the private key. And that's what the function is looking for. A new hash was calculated, which isn't inherently bad at this point. But the problem is the new hash is not matching the original hash that was signed with the private key. And if you're a little bit kind of fuzzy on what that means, just imagine for a moment that I gave you message.txt and I put on the bottom, you know, like signed by Anthony. Kind of think like a photograph, a baseball card, a signed picture, a signed something, right? It has like the artist's name. Now, if someone were to come up to you and be like, hey, here's the original picture, but the signature is missing on the bottom, failure. That's what's happening here. Does that make more sense? Cool. Nice. Kind of? Okay. Whoops. Sorry, wrong one. Soccer stream, there we go. Okay, let's go back over here. Okay. So digital signing? Yes, exactly. Okay. Imagine like this image over here, stream, rushing water, nice little mountains, maybe some snow-peaked valleys, right? Okay, little house. Nice little picture. So imagine this was the message, right? If I wanted to provide authenticity, that this is the authentic, this is the original message that I made, what I would do is I would take this message, okay, and then I would I've just ran out of space over there, so I'm just going to say .bin. It's not working out in my favor. Okay. So all what I've done here is I've taken message.txt and I've just signed it. Like, here's my name. That's really it. Like, I've just said, okay, well, this is by me, and I've signed it, and I can only do this because this is my private key. My private key signs in for intents and purposes, imagine it puts like my name on it. Now, if someone were to go and hand you, also a couple follows over the Freedom and Cy42, thanks for the follows. And Nguyen as well too. Sorry, I missed you earlier. But so if someone were to now give you an image, if they were to go and essentially say, okay, well, at this point in time, if someone were to try to give you this file and say, hey, this is actually message.txt, well, all what you need to do is take this file and run it through a cryptographic algorithm with the signature.bin file and my public key for a verification check. And it'll be really quickly letting you know that whether my signature is there or not. That's really it. Freedom DAO. So is all cryptography broken to the time in machines? Excuse me. Is all cryptography broken due to time and time machines and rewinding time before crypto generated to see the data? I think yes, personally, from what I see. Basically, the entire concept of SHA-256, etc. is expecting that users cannot manipulate time, but if you can, then it's broken. I mean, sure, yeah, if you want to get metaphysical. If you can go back in time, you can change, well, you can do just about anything. But the concept here is that once I have signed something with my private key, and I provide you a signature.bin file, like a receipt of it, it's a record. It is a permanent record at that point. And you can use my public key that I give you with my record, and a mathematical algorithm will happen in the back to verify and look, well, okay, does that signature exist? And if it does, yes. If it doesn't, then no. So that's the concept of digital signing. Now, what you need to be aware of is, let's go back inside of message.txt. All right, I'm going to vim inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete that line. Okay. And now I'm going to run the same formula again. So all right, Freedom, I'm gonna give you a little warning over there, kind of coming out of nowhere. Cut out the spam. First and last warning. So that being said, as you can see over here inside of the message.txt, once we removed the tampered with data added to it, it actually passed the verified okay. Like it passed the check. Now, why do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened? Someone try to tell me. Why did the digital signatures check pass when I removed the tampered data from the file? Yes, it is identical to the original. So look, if I were to do echo and append this text to the message.txt, and then I ran a SHA-256 sum on it, right? The hash has changed. But what if I were to go back inside of Vim, message.txt, delete that line, run another hash check on it again, The hash has returned back to normal. Because remember, hashing is impartial. It doesn't care about authenticity. It cares about integrity. And all what it's looking to see is the structure and data within the file. That's all it's doing. That's all it's looking for. So remember we learned about hashing yesterday, that theoretically, when you hash a certain amount of data, like when you hash an entire book, an egg, a box, like it doesn't matter what the data structure looks like from start to finish. When you hash the entire of it, the thing, the hash should always be the same. So if we tampered with the data, but then removed what we tampered with, you would never know the difference because the hash should go back to normal. And this is the problem. This is why we have digital certificates. This is why we have digital signing. Because now, not only can we use a hash to verify integrity, but we can also use it to verify authenticity, that it was indeed the original file. That's why. We've returned it back to its original state. Pretty cool. So let's actually generate a digital certificate now to see what this looks like. If I were to do a new command of OpenSSL, and again, this is just syntax. So we're going to use a digital certificate of, the format is called an X509. And again, don't get too hung up on all the different cipher suites and algorithms and things. These are referenceable knowledge that you could learn and get more exposure to the more you kind of read about it. What's more important is what we're doing. So we're going to throw an attack key of private key of what we generated. So we're going to create a new X509 certificate. We'll show you what it looks like in a moment. We're going to say that it expires after 365 days. So 1 year. And we're going to write it to the file of certificate.pem. And notice that when we do this, it's just going to provide us a bunch of prompts. Like this is, we're creating a certificate that we'd see online. Okay. So let's take a look at what that certificate looks like. Well, a whole bunch of base 64 encoded stuff, right? We can actually use the OpenSSL library to read all of this and like do the decoding for us. And this is what a web browser does. And we want it to read just a text. Whoops. Cool. Okay, wait, let me scroll back up. So we can use the OpenSSL library and specify the format that we want to read the certificate from, which is X509. We generated that above. So here's the statement where we use to generate the certificate. And now we're going to read it. And this is just a function built into the OpenSSL library. We feed it to the certificate.pem file, and we're just going to say we don't want an out, we just don't want to read the output to the terminal. And here you go. We can see the certificate contains a serial number, SHA-256 with RSA encryption. It tells us everything about it, date, time, and here's the public key. There are also more keys that are provided through this process. There's many verification checks that actually happen. And here is your digital signature. So this is what happens. When Bob gives his public key, he's not giving the public key, he's giving his actual certificate in this case. And the certificate contains a digital signature. Now we have authenticity. The same signing that happened before, the same verification check that happened before, where we do a verification check with the public key and we get a verification okay. All that, like there's a whole bunch of checks that happen now. We check the certificate authority, we check where it came from, we check the public key itself. Multiple checks happen at this point, depending on the complexity of what's been provided. And all of this is made possible because we have a digital signature to say that, yes, this came from that matching key. Thanks for the follow too, Code Alarm. Pretty cool, right? Now, if I were to go on the web, I could inspect one right now. So let's go to cookies and site data. Oh wait, I haven't used Chrome in a while. Connection is secure, certificate is valid. So here you go. Here is what your browser is looking for. Common name. So we saw there's DNS records inside here when it's available. Here's the certificate. Here's the hash, right? It's been digitally signed. Here's the public key. And you can go and inspect further details. Right? Like here's the subject's public key. Certificate signature algorithm tells you the value as well too. Here's the cert and the public key for the final value. That's how it works. This is it. So to kind of recap, how this is all essentially working, you know, when you connect your website or when it's trying to establish a TLS connection, this check happens in the background. First, there's the Diffie-Hellman exchange, whereby the public key is provided from the server to the client. And then there's a verification check. There's a digital signature signing check made by the client by what was provided. And this is why we have a certificate authority, because you have a third party to trust. So you do a digital signing verification check with the third party that you both trust. So there's another form of trust involved. After those checks are confirmed, your computer will then take the public key, in this case, and then it can generate the pre-master secret and then encrypt it, send it back over to the server. You both now have a pre-master secret, and then you both generate the symmetric key, and then you both have a fully encrypted connection. So is a certificate something to show we have a digital signature to show we are? Yes. That you are, yes, exactly. A certificate with a digital signature provides authenticity, and that is the backbone to ensure that we are who we say we are. Because if we didn't have that and we went to a website and there was just a public key available on the website, well, how do we know that the public key came from the owner? That's why. And this is it. This is the most complex that it's ever going to get for you for a good while. This is it. This is the extent of the difficulty of cryptography, of what you need to know and where you need to generally be knowledgeable for. That's it. KS saying, so the certificate authority stamps the certificate with their own private key to validate it. Correct. Yes. So every time there is another layer, like another certificate authority or another person, another certificate in the process, it's the same way that we saw in the command line. The initial key creation happened, and then a certificate was generated, and by that process, the private key was used to sign it and create a digital signature SHA-256 algorithm. used in that case. Yep. And this is how everything works. And that's it. That's the extent of things. And you're not going to get all of it at once. That's fine. This is a harder area to understand. And this is why I said yesterday, I want every student to go and do your best to try and visually draw this. Like, map this out as a process. And if you can do that, then you're good with this whole module. Truly, like you're fine with everything. Doug's saying, should they know how to spot piece of malware attached to larger packets broken up, send it with the deal? Not yet. It's a bit advanced. that's a 200 level. All what we're looking for is look, when you're all tier 1 for what we're training. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, the hash doesn't change. That's what we're trying to demonstrate. Is like, you could add or remove data, you could do things, but the hash doesn't change per se. Yeah, like at a tier 1 analyst level, I mean, look, like, you're going to be triaging false positives and like looking for weird indicators. So like, you might get a ticket where a user accessed a website, maybe it tripped something, they were connecting to a website that had an invalid certificate or something that generated some traffic or a warning, and maybe you have a rule set up to catch that, and you have to go and verify and then inspect that certificate on the website to make sure that it all matches up. Maybe it was like a local server that someone didn't sign. Like, maybe the developers didn't sign a local certificate yet. Right? And you would just need to verify that. And you would be able to verify that by understanding how this stuff all kind of works in structures. So, 200 level, Doug. We'll save the more advanced stuff coming. Yeah. Yeah, or the cert's expired or something, right? Like, that's what you're going to be running into. Security is so bad the entire US. Yeah, exactly, right? So maybe the users certs generated from compromised companies. Exactly, yeah. So this is why you hear about like you remember like NVIDIA? NVIDIA certificates that were compromised. If someone gets the ability to spoof or use a certificate and then say that, and when they're able to sign things with it, you got a problem. Freedom, you believe in this chat room? Yeah. Just keep hacking on it. Well, I believe in you, Freedom. Thanks for trimming down the time rants earlier. We'll save that chat for another stream. Cool. Okay. All right. So, last thing we want to cover in this module is cooking with Cyberchef, and then we can move over to the Windows Triage. We'll take a quick break after that. All right, so we're going to move over to the next lab, cooking with the Cyberchef. A couple different ways to get there. You could go straight to their GitHub, or do what probably anyone else does and just Google Cyberchef. Gonna go inside here. CI saying, will it be Rob's turn soon in Windows Triage? No. Sorry to bring it down over the CI, but Rob's not going to be streaming the SOC100 content. It's me. You're stuck with me. For good or for worse. Okay. Cyberchef. So, Cyberchef, it's a web app. It's a tool you can download. You can have it locally hosted on your endpoint. And what it really is just a GUI-based view to perform drag and drop cryptographic operations. Primarily cryptographic operations, I should say. There's a lot of other operations you can provide inside of there as well too. And what happens is it allows you to build a recipe. And it does this in real time, which is super handy. So you don't have to be stuck in the command line like worrying about like mistakes or things that you're running into or which library to use, etc. So I could go inside here and I could say something like, hey chat, what's going on? And I could do to base 64. And then I could take this output, put inside chat, send that all to you. You could all now go to Cyberchef itself. Go there and then paste in that output that I gave you. And what I want you to do, so you would go and drag that off, like you can just right click and, sorry, you can first click. You can left click, first click. You can left click and then drag it off and then do something like from base 64 over here. Okay, so from base 64 and look at that. Hey chat, what's going on? You can read my message right away. So I want you all to do that. Go and click on a link, open up Cyberchef and go and decrypt my message that I sent you. Or decode. Jeez, too many words. Go and decode that message. And then what I want someone to do, without trolling me, so I'm going to look off the screen, is I want someone to send me a message. Go and encode a message to me in base 64, and then I want you to DM it to me, actually. How do you do that? I've never actually DM'd on Twitch. I guess you should be able to like click my name and whisper it. So send me a message, someone using Cyberchef, and I want you to base 64 encode it. And then we're going to put it on the stream. I will wait. KS saying the crypto class I'm talking doesn't show you any of this in action, so having this talk is extremely valuable. Yeah, man, glad it helps. It makes such a difference when you can actually just like go and play with it. Okay, so level effect. All right. So I got a message over here. Gonna open that up in a separate browser. I trust you, Yoshi, but just following what I said I would do. So. Okay, so here's the message from Oshi. All right. Down the rabbit hole we go. Thank you for getting involved. Nice. So it's that simple. We now have this ability to work with an app like Cyberchef to perform any of the typical operations you'd expect with encoding and decoding, encrypting, decrypting, etc. All those various operations. A lot of logic as well too. You can see on the left-hand side. extractors, compression, so you can zip. Very, very handy tool. This is very commonly used in cybersecurity. And even software development too, to be honest. Cyberchef for a reason. So let's cook. All right. So we have an encoded string from the lab that we want to work with. Can't put inside of chat. So here you go. It's actually here in the first bit. So we're going to copy this. And we're going to go inside of Cyberchef and put this inside of here for input. Clear that out. Now, when we do that, oh, wait, sorry. Yeah, we're not going to do that just yet, right? Yeah, okay, sorry. Just wanted to make sure we're tracking. Yes, okay. So we're going to be using this encoded string. Now, we can see that we have some base 64 over here, right? We know this because of those little padding sides at the end of it. Now, you can see that there's like this magic wand. And Cyberchef will try to actually make a guess of what it should do to break the output. So I'm going to go and search actually from base 64. Okay. Now, we can see that something didn't really work. Like, what did we get here? We got something that was encrypted. And if you highlight this, you can actually see what that component looks like inside of the input itself. Now, what we can see here, kind of looking at this, is it seems to be like, if you look at this, I'm going to highlight A. And I'm also going to highlight this like under, I don't know what to call that. Like an upside down question mark or whatever, right? Now, notice as I'm doing this, as I'm highlighting different things like the brackets, well, take a look. Bracket, so left bracket, as I was kind of doing this, if I can actually highlight that properly. Okay. At this point in time, between the upside down question mark and this accented A is all representative of the same character, the number 8. Remember what we learned about encryption and hashing? We shouldn't be able to spot like weird similarities like that. So, if that's the case, then there is a likelihood that we're not necessarily dealing with encryption per se at this point in time. This might actually mean that we're still working with encoding, because encoding is about compatibility, and this is where we can pick up on patterns. Exactly, Ariel, yeah. So, now, we could spend a lot of time on this, but what we can do is maybe try a cipher. Let's throw like a ROT13 cipher on the top. Now, notice that when I did that, it immediately actually, so Cyberchef was able to pick up on it right away. And what this is saying over here is that we've actually got an output of a different type of a formatting of data. So this is actually in a zip format. So what I can do is I could use this little magic wand, and we can really break that down for us right away. So the data itself was actually, it was ROT13 ciphered after it was base 64 encoded. So we're going to switch it back 13 positions, and then we're going to run from base 64. And Cyberchef was happy to let us know that this was actually in the form of gzip. So we're going to gun zip it, and then we're actually also going to be able to provide a from binary. And if I were to like pause this for a moment, we'll kind of work backwards. This is what happened over here. Yeah, ROT13 is a type of shift cipher. Correct. Yeah, KS. And remember, we only knew that. Here, I'm going to actually disable all these for a moment so you can see what I mean. Yes, ROT13 is rotation 13. So rotates 13 characters along the alphabet. And we knew something was weird with this input, that this wasn't actually base 64 decoding ready. Because as we were moving our mouse around, we started to notice similarities, right? Like, look at all those V's highlighted by being in this position of the output down over here. That's not encryption, that's encoding. And it looks like base 64, but there's still something that happened before it. So in this case, we took a guess saying, okay, well, maybe there is a shift cipher that is in place. And a common one would be ROT13. So we threw ROT13 first, and then we did base 64 decoding, which actually did provide us an output that Cyberchef was able to pick up and say that this is actually a gzip file. So we use gunzip to unzip it, and then, sorry, unzip it from binary. It's really not liking that now, is it? Jeez. Okay, there we go. So remove all those because it wants to do it all at once. So we're going to gunzip it. And then we're going to, after the unzip, we had a binary output. So we did from binary, which had more base 64. So we did from base 64 again. And then what does this look like? Well, if you're not sure, you can use the little magic wand, but this is actually from hex. So this is hex code now. So we do hex. Bring that on the bottom. And take a look at this. What this actually was invoking an expression for a new web object over here. We're going to download a string. And the string is evilsite.com, evil code invoke mimikatz.ps1. And then it's going to invoke mimikatz with command privilege debug, and then dump creds. Holy, right? Isn't that insane? Look at all those layers. So to kind of recap on that, we were able to pick up on the fact that there was something wrong. We dragged our mouse around. We were able to pick up on a pattern on the initial part. And patterns mean encoding. Very cool. So this is what a threat actor would do. Something like this. They would hide commands, within encoding, within zipping, within unzipping, within compressing, you name it. Like, there's multiple layers of things that could happen, and you can make it as layered as you like to obfuscate what actually was here inside. Doug's saying activate, you think it means cats? Yeah. You'll find out about this later as we learn more about what this actually means, but yes, this is bad. This is a post-compromise not C2 framework, I should say, but a post-compromise framework utilized to get really under the hood of the Windows internals and interact with processes of the highest level of privilege that could go and retrieve things like stored credentials, both both from disk and from memory, depending. And also you can do advanced things beyond that. This is where you can start like impersonating processes, process injection, DLL injection, etc. A lot of advanced attacks when you start seeing things like this. Yeah, super cool. Welcome to cryptography, right? Nice. Mimikat sounds like a new Pokemon. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go look it up, you can take a look over here by ParrotSec. It's not even like it's not an offensive, it's not a threat actor tool. Like, this was originally made by someone to go and actually just like learn more about Windows and kind of debug it and test it and stuff. And ultimately, well, you can perform pass the hash, pass the ticket, golden tickets, etc. Ton of stuff you can do. Log on passwords. You're going to learn about all these things. Karina's saying, so do you know you're making progress in each layer when you do not see funny characters? I mean, it's going to change every single time, Karina. Like in this case, what happened here originally, right, was we tried to do from base 64 because we thought it was, but it failed. So when you're in a situation like this and you see something like encoded, and encoded does not decode with what it should be, then this is when you start like moving your mouse around and holding like left click and like looking for similarities, analyzing the text yourself and looking for things that might stand out, you name it. And the pattern that we picked up on was just the fact that like similar characters were repeating. And if similar characters are repeating, then you're probably dealing with something that is like shifting it in some capacity. And then, so your ultimate question there, so like when you don't see funny characters, I mean, you're going to see funny characters. So Zeno, how would the code be reversed on the attacker's computer? Well, you would have something to, first of all, like just essentially do this whole process. So you'd have a process that would perform a ROT13 on the data. Then it would decode it from base 64. Then it would gunzip it. And then it would interpret it from binary. And then it would do another decoding from base 64. And then finally from hex. And then it would interpret this string and execute it. That's how. Yeah. Okay. It's break time. And then we're going to go into Windows. Yeah. Mimikatz, Hydra, Sock Ghoulish, Agent Tesla, Ghost. There's a ton of things, and you're all going to learn about it later. So let's get these foundations down. Let's get this all layered down and get moving, because then we can start having some real fun, right? Not that this isn't fun. This is still interesting, but yeah. Cool. Okay, let's take a break. That's right, Doug. Yeah, we're going to pull on Doug soon and threat hunting when we get to SOC100 5. Pumped. Cool. Okay. We are back in action. Sweet. Okay. So we're going to move on. We are officially done with the cryptography content. So expectation in this module is to have a general understanding of hashing, encoding, symmetric and asymmetric encryption, and digital signatures, and then being able to work with a tool like Cyberchef, and just to generally understand those concepts of what we covered yesterday into today. And again, this module is similar to like when you first start with networking. It's very abstract. It's very hard to visualize and touch, feel, see, and smell. Like you can't see a lot of the magic happening when it comes to cryptographic algorithms. So it's much more important to first focus on the concepts and the definitions of what these things are and how they work and how they operate from a simple level, like just like simple blocks. Okay. Like what I want you all to be able to do, like I said, for this module is to effectively just like make diagrams, just like squares and circles and triangles, like whatever it is you need to do to conceptually understand the flow of what is happening. That's your first objective. Your second objective is to then match up the terms and definitions to your flow chart. Like make sure that they make sense, that they're accurate, that they are precise, and that they're meeting all of what we explained yesterday and to today. By the end of it, through this module, you should be able to walk away and generally explain the concepts of symmetric and asymmetric encryption, hashing and coding, a TCP plus TLS handshake, and how you can work with a tool like Cyberchef to work with different types of cryptographic and data-related operations to essentially optimize and secure data in transit. That's effectively what we're trying to do here. Okay? Does that make sense? I think that's a fair statement to kind of walk away with. So please do not rabbit hole too hard of like, I don't want you to get super deep in the weeds of like the math and how this stuff is working. I want you to come to that later. Later you can start to specialize further into the deeper inner workings of the math, the cipher suites, much more technical terms. First objective is to just generally understand how this stuff works. Okay? Promise me, please. This is the only module that I'm going to say this in. Please do not rabbit hole when you're studying going through this. You can do that later. This is a module that you need to get the foundations nailed down heavily first. So while it's cool to see, right? Like, yes, I have... Like, yes, this is cool that you've now seen a threat actor TTP level of indicator of compromise uncovered from layers of obfuscation. Sure. Cool, right? It's fun. The sexy stuff. But come down from that. We will get there. SOC 100, 3, 4, and 5 are coming. First things first. Make sure you have a strong baseline understanding of cryptographic principles and the supporting technologies that we use to ensure confidentiality and integrity and authenticity. Okay? Zeno, we want to see on execute it. We will. Don't worry. We will be detonating malware. It's coming. Okay? It's coming. First things first. Yeah. Good tip over there, Oshikuru. Yeah. Yeah. All good stuff. CI, so SOC 1 and SOC 100-1 and -2. Yeah, of course. This is foundational stuff. Yeah. This is like your baseline foundations. This is why we're covering this with you. And now we can move over to Windows. Now we can actually move into Windows Triage. Okay, so I think, yeah, Windows Triage and Malware Analysis is going to be a bit of a tough module at first. It'll get a little advanced. And then SOC 100-3 and 4 is just, it's getting to work, okay? That's what those three modules are. There isn't a lot of like new stuff being put on you. It's SOC 100-3 and 4 is exposure and experience. SOC 100-1 and 2 is meant to lay the foundation and get your bearings and some skills. And then you're going to get to work. And then by the end of -4, you should be fairly comfortable with tier 1 types of incidents and alerts. And then in -5, we're going to lay the foundation for advanced fundamentals. But yeah, Cyberchef is big. Yeah, it was developed by the government. Ton of people use it. It's used all the time. Dog, we can go over that. How to detect malware and IOCs and EDR, SOAR, network traffic. Yeah. We're going to go through advanced stuff in 100-5. We're going to love it. Yeah, Happy got some snow, huh? Okay, cool. All right, let's jump over to Windows Triage and Malware Analysis now. So we're going to start out with the first lecture on processes, threads, and virtual memory. All right, so we're going to hop a little bit back into iPad time. Let's start going through some of this stuff. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about processes versus programs. We're going to do some like high level kind of talk about some points, then we're going to zoom in on them right after. So whoa, what the hell is that? Processes versus okay. So you can consider, and we've talked a little bit about this before in like SOC 100-1 with Windows internals, like to some degree. And now we're going to start going a little bit more into it. But a process will typically spawn and be created from a program, like an executable. Okay? So a program you can consider to be like static instructions. Go here, go there, do this, come back. If this, do that. Static instructions. This is where we get code. This is where we get programming languages. They don't do anything while they're in this format. Okay? They are stored on disk. Typically. Now, a process is equal to a living instance of that program, okay? And that's a key thing to remember. It's an instance of the program running in memory, okay? That's important to pay attention to as well. Okay, so like a program would be something like a .exe that you can execute, and once it's executed, it'll run and become a process on itself. So what happens when this is going on? Well, when a user launches the program, right? A couple things happen. A couple things happen to become this process. So, so the OS, so the operating system, what it's going to do is it's going to load certain segments of this code into memory. Okay. And then we're going to set up these different types of like segments, different components of what this process should look like. I should say, it's an easy way to think about this. Okay. Think about this sort of like the program is kind of like a recipe. And when you look at a recipe, you have ingredients, you have requirements, you have time, you have space, right? Like you have tools, you have things that you need to do to put this recipe together, to cook with. And then once you begin to cook with it, like the actual cooking part, you have a process running. That's effectively what's happening when a process starts from a program. A program is the recipe, and when you follow the recipe, you get the ingredients, get your tools, time, temperature, space, steps, all of that. And you follow it in order, and then once the cooking process begins, hence the name, right? The cooking process, then it is cooking. It is now a running process of that recipe. Does that make more sense, kind of thinking of it like that? Yes. Yes, Karina. So you need to see a differentiation between these. Yes, it's fair to say a process must be running to be a process. Correct. Yes. It is the execution of the program which turns into a process. Now, there are things that make up this process, right? Memory allocation. You're going to hear things like stack and heap. You're going to hear things like, process ID. You're going to hear things like, scheduling priority. You will learn more and more and more about these things. Control blocks. Permissions. Open files. Like, I don't have to, I guess I'm just trying to think like random things in my head at this point. You're going to see a lot of things, right? That's the execution of it. Now, this is important to understand because an attacker is going to prefer, where possible, to exploit something in the runtime state when the process is running, okay? And they want to do that because it's easier. It's easier to hide that way. And if I'll give you an example. If you were making a recipe to make, I don't know, to make like, if you wanted to make apple pie, okay? Delicious. You had the ingredients laid out. Now, if I was an attacker and I infected the apples, like I corrupted them, you know, they turned brown, they got wilted, you would be able to you'd be able to see that pretty easily, right? Because the apple wouldn't really be much of an apple anymore if I went and I attacked the base ingredients of it. It's easier to detect. Now, if you baked an apple pie and like you got the ingredients ready and I slipped in a couple slices of some rotten fruit inside there, it'd probably be harder to detect. You might notice something a little off, but you might also easily overlook it. And that's why attackers want to target runtime processes where possible. Because there are a lot of detection steps along the way, from the static code, the static instructions that are on disk for the program, where it lives, size, the hash, all that stuff, right? Yeah, replace the sugar with salt. Yeah, exactly. You'll notice right away, like when you're putting it together and it starts to run and you're creating the process, when you're creating an instance of the program, you'll notice pretty quickly something's off. But once it's cooking, once it's running, it's a lot harder to detect those types of changes. And this is what attackers are trying to do. Does that make sense when you think about it like that? Yeah. Karina's saying, so you're saying it's easier to go look for malevolent instructions in static written code? Totally. Totally is. You have much more visibility of what's going on. Totally. Yes, totally. Same with the pie. Once pie is baking. Once it's baking in the oven, pretty easy to kind of slip something in there. Conversely, what if I wanted to bake another process and I didn't want to mess with the apple pie? And I waited for the chef to go and turn the oven on and start baking that pie. And all I did was open up the oven and then put in my process. Put in a different pie that I wanted to bake inside the oven. Maybe I don't even have to touch that original pie that's baking. I can go and put something inside there that shouldn't be there. So you see, this is why attackers want to go and do that. And this is why it's good to have a strong understanding of a delineation. What is the program and what is the process? So attackers want to target the runtime state of a program where possible. That's how they're going to make moves. That's how they're going to make waves and pivot and all that. Abe's saying is really smart hack. You just wait and grab the fully ready apple pie, then run away. Yeah, right? You can do that too. Yeah. Instead of waiting for the goods and putting it together yourself, just someone else makes it and then you take it and run. Yeah. Totally. So, attackers want to target the runtime of a program, i.e. the process. Tom saying, so could you also say it's easier to trust at that point because you're a couple of steps into the process? Exactly. There are a lot of checks that have to happen along the way for a program to become a process. And if I can just bypass and wait for all that to happen and then just get into the process later, way easier. Way, way easier. Now, it's not an easy attack by any means, but it's an easier thing to do. Yeah. So, we can think of process that has all those ingredients inside we talked about before. So we have memory, right? We have all these things. ID, like you name it, all these like things, right? That are inside of this. Now inside of here, we actually also have things called threads. And also DLLs. Hold on a second over here. Okay, sorry about that. Back. Someone was buzzing like crazy. Didn't know what was going on. It was not an emergency, but I thought it was. So, all good. Threat actor has been eliminated from the compound. I'll get that edited out of the streams when it goes on the YouTube. My apologies. So, yeah. Yeah. Ekin saying a nice SOC content mind sharing site. Yeah. Hop over, Ekin. Welcome to stream as well too. We're over on here, we're on Level Effect, and you can follow along. We're doing the SOC 100-2 course right now, so I'm just kind of walking everyone through it. Cool. Thanks for the follow. Invader Vim, nice. Well, listen, Invader Zim, we're gonna have to get you on Vim at one point. But Kenji, thanks for the follow as well too. Thanks for follow both of y'all. Thanks, Ave. Yeah. It just seemed weird. I hadn't seen the number before, and then it started to buzz me like crazy too. So, anyways, we're all good now. Appreciate the concerns and worries. But cool. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about a process, and we were trying to explain that it's, like a threat actor is trying to target a process in the runtime state of which is a program. That's effectively what a process is. Because when the process is running, it's easier to slip something in or take something out or hollow it out or replace something inside there or utilize the same space. Because when a process is running, you have to understand that all these things are trusted. Okay? Once the process is cooking, once the pie is in the oven, once the pot is on the stove, once we've allocated these things and permissions are approved and set, if I'm an attacker, this is where I'm going to try to do things like process injection, memory injection, file, like basically anything you see here in this bucket that I'm kind of drawing, right? Memory, open files, ID, threads, DLLs, you name it. Okay? All of those things are up. It's essentially fair game. They've been approved. The ingredients are assembled. It's harder now for someone to detect what's going on if I play my cards right. I have a lot of different components to mess around with at this point in time. Okay. That's where we kind of left off over there. And we started to talk about one of these components that we really need to pay attention to is the threads and DLLs. All right. So let's move over and sort of like zoom in a little bit in these things, and then we're going to actually, we're going to do a small lab on Process Explorer. Okay. So high level still for now, as we continue to get further into these things. Threads you can consider to be like the individual like workers within inside of the process, and they are executing tasks concurrently, same time. And this is where you've heard of the concept of like multi-threading. Threading is a really important component that has really improved the efficiency and the effectiveness of processes. For a good while, we had individual processes and individual threads, and it was really difficult to manage this. And then we had this technology breakthrough of this thing called multi-threading. And this has now allowed us to have one process do multiple things at once while still utilizing the same amount of like memory, permissions, ID, DLLs, etc. Like it can share things by spawning more and more of these little threads. So you can consider threads to be like little workers inside of a process. And if you want to try to think about this now as a different way, instead of thinking about like baking or cooking, right? Imagine we had Okay, we had like a little factory floor with a conveyor belt. Yeah, okay. iPad's on. All right, good. Okay, now these little threads are kind of like little factory workers inside of the process, and they're all doing lots of different little things. This little top factory worker, you know, like they might be involved in like first inspection. The second one might be a second inspection. The third one might have to start opening up a box. The fourth one's going to package it. The other one is going to use some supplies next to it, and so forth. That's how threads work inside of a process. So these little workers are running around and they're doing lots of different things. And when you have multiple of them, you have this concept called multi-threading. Now, equals, so speed goes up, right? Speed boost, plus plus. That's what's happening over here. However, what happens, okay? I'll try to make this quite simple to understand then. What happens when this first thread is working at 100% speed, but this thread is working at 1000% speed, right? Like things start to look okay going through here, but then all of a sudden they shoot through. And what happens is these threads might get missed. It kind of looks like we're playing like a strategy game here. I just looked on the stream. No, this is not Factorio or whatever. Okay? What's happening here is a vulnerability. Okay? What's happening here is a thing called race conditions. Imagine this is a race for the workers to kind of work through themselves and do their own tasks at their own conditions in their own times. When things get out of sync, we can run into things like race conditions. We can, if maybe this process is not being monitored this thread's not being monitored anymore, well, let's go ahead and inject something over here. Okay. And it might get overlooked. And then when it gets to here, we have both things happen at the same time. Conversely, if things move so fast and we get a backlog of problems that happen, right? Like this all builds up here. We get a crash. So you could also compromise the process just by messing around with the thread. Now, the operating system does its best to do this, but the threads have a program. They have specific tasks and instructions. So if you can compromise them to do things that they should or shouldn't do, you get vulnerabilities. But first you need to understand that the threads exist in the first place and they have individual functions and they're supposed to be there. But this is what happens and this is how we can get vulnerabilities. And this is an example of like a runtime process being infected. So you, as a SOC analyst, when you're in the field and you have a potential suspect process, what do we want to do? We want to open up the process and start inspecting what these threads are doing. Conversely, we also have the usage of memory. Okay. So before I explain something, based on what I've said so far, someone tell me then how a buffer overflow could happen. Without even talking about memory yet. Just like theoretically, just like think about it. Yeah. So Xeno put too much in the buffer by injecting code or input in a process. If it has to do with memory, then maybe the storage. Yeah. You could put bad instructions so that they spill into OS memory or somewhere where they get executed. Correct. Yeah. Too many processes. Yeah. These are all effective. These are all answers. There is no one like particular way for all this to happen. But what happens here? Yes, when more memory is needed than allocated. So it's effectively just trying to work with the given allocated memory for a process, and you could use a certain amount of additional instructions and commit it to the memory that's been reserved for that process. And what's going to happen is it'll spill over, right? And you can think about this from the threads example. If I were to try to put a giant box, right, on this conveyor belt, well, what's going to happen is this conveyor belt might just be designed to take a certain format. Okay? So if I try to put this giant box through, well, what's going to happen is it's going to take the first bit, and then there is still remaining memory over here that has to be committed. So what's going to happen is more memory is going to be put inside the belt, and then more, and then we have a problem. Now, normally the instructions should have just went and continued along the belt and been committed. But the problem here is the instructions will continue to go off the belt and still be executed somewhere else. And this is how you get a buffer overflow. And in this space over here, is other memory. And this is how you can go and you can examine. You might be able to retrieve memory used in another process where instructions are being stored, and you can retrieve confidential information, or you can inject code into it to be executed somewhere else where it shouldn't. So you see, right? Just by generally understanding that the process has components like these things called threads, you can make a safe assumption just by working with the same concept of this like physical space, that working with memory can also have similar types of vulnerabilities. Maybe not to crash the thread, but in this case, we're going to overflow the memory. So inside the memory, you're typically going to have, inside of a process, two things, right? We have physical memory. This is like your actual computer, right? Like the chip. DDR 9000, okay? And then you've got your virtual memory. Now, the virtual memory, as I should say, sorry, one thing to highlight about this physical memory is that this is finite. Limited. Virtual memory is going to allow you to work with your physical memory space plus your disk space. Okay, bit of a trade-off. You're trading off performance to be able to have more memory. This is how like a program can crash. You know, you're allocating it a bunch of memory. It's not running as performant. It'll just crash, kind of thing, right? Or it's taking up so much memory that it starts to expand on your disk, and then your computer will crash. Meloon, thanks for the follow. Thanks for being here. So what happens is developers try to optimize this. Pen testers and red teamers and threat actors are trying to look for leaks, something along here that can break, somewhere they can get in this memory space inside of a process. Okay. Now, typically, there's two terms, kind of loosely cover them for now, but you're going to have the stack and you're going to have the heap in terms of how these things are structured inside of memory. So you consider the stack, you can think about being for like, maybe like automatic short-term functions, like things need to fire right away. A quick read, quick write, or something like that. So fast, short function, automatic, like if statements, right? Like this happens, do this kind of thing. So that's where that memory is going to be utilized, because it's pretty performant, and it grows and it shrinks, but it's still an allocated amount of space. Keyword there, right? Automatic. If I'm a threat actor, I'm going to want to compromise something that has an automatic function call, right? So I can send it code instructions and it'll just execute it. Why do you think we have the website called Stack Overflow? Yeah? Little light bulb moment? Did that make you think about that for a moment? Okay. Then we have the heap. The heap is a different part of the memory, which is essentially for like a dynamic. Yeah, the moment when I said stack, yeah, exactly, right? Dynamic memory allocation. So this is things like manual. You are in control, essentially. This is when you're going to be like requesting, and this is where you're going to see things like memory. Like when a process all of a sudden starts to expand in the memory scope, that means that it wasn't designed to do that. Like if you start to see heap interaction, again, I know this is advanced, you'll come across these things time, but just to kind of give you a differentiation, if the stack is the execution of the program, like intended by the design of the developers, with some degree of heap management involved to sort of like inflate and deflate, well, the stack is going to be firing things off automatically based on conditions. The heap is going to be a little bit more manually intervened with and controlled. So if you see a program with a lot of interaction within like this heap memory space, that's a huge concern. If all of a sudden it starts to grow massively in memory space, maybe a threat actor has compromised it and is trying to expand the memory scope with the permission of the process to execute commands. Now there are there are a lot of protections in place. Like I'm saying this stuff as if like, oh my god, like every process is vulnerable, and it's not the case. There are a lot of protections in place for this, and you'll kind of learn about these things as we go. So like memory protection, we're gonna have things. Lou up, thanks for the follow. We have things like separation. We have ability to there's this thing called ASLR, so address space layout randomization, right? Jeez. Not to be confused with ASMR, totally different thing. But ASLR, you know, we're going to have these memory protection types of techniques over here. And so in this case, like it'll scramble and jumble memory around at runtime, making it quite difficult for a threat actor to get inside there and mess around with it. You have separation, you have segmentation, and if that's kind of like confusing, I think, you know, you can think about it like a parking lot. Right? Like your parking lot at work that you ever had to go to, right? Like, typically you're going to have like, I don't know, like your boss is like parking over here, right? Like typically in an office environment. Like you have a car parked over here, a car parked over there. So like this memory space over here is allocated for a specific role or like a specific thread. This is allocated for another specific role or thread, etc. So there's different ways that you can sort of try to prevent these things from happening. And then a process might just crash. But if you're in security, your radar goes off like, well, why did that process crash? What type of event occurred? What type of event? And this is where you start to come up with like detection engineering, and you come up with more advanced security, because you as a SOC analyst are not, like, you're not so much involved with this. You're sort of looking for, and we're going to get to it, like in the triage side of things, you're trying to put out the fire. But as you get more advanced, you start to do forensics. You start to do defer. And then you start to do engineering to identify, based off of a forensics and an incident response case, like what did you uncover and how can you prevent this from happening again? So you start to look at, like, if someone parked, you know, like if a circle tried to park inside, that's not going to work. And what might happen is you might get an error, and you might see something like memory allocate. You might see like a function being executed, and that wasn't like by design. And that's where the security eye comes in when you're doing your forensics and your investigation of like, okay, well, what the hell happened? We had this process. We had maybe like, we had a crash on this heap side of the memory where we had like a memory allocate function being called, and it was expanding, and that wasn't by design. So like, what happened to that process? And this is how you can spot a threat actor and these advanced tactics and techniques of them trying to circumvent and maybe process hijack or memory hijack, because when they're inside of the process, they need to run commands at a very low level, and those commands could do something like this, and it'll look like an error. But you, as a security analyst, once you start to really kind of understand these different components, and this is advanced, that's how you get better. Like, that's how you become an advanced SOC analyst, and that's how you get into defer, and that's how you get into detection engineering, is by understanding these internals at a level that you understand, again, what is normal and what is not normal. Does that make sense? You do not need to memorize this right now, by the way. I'm trying to give some examples and some like stories. What you need to understand at this point in time is that the above, we have a program that is static instructions, code, and executable on the disk. And the process is the instance of that program running. And inside of the process is a ton of additional properties that can be mapped out. Memory allocation, open files, ID, threads, DLLs. And one of those things is a thread, which is like little workers that help the process along and make the process do different things. And the more you have of them, the more you have is a multi-threaded application for speed and efficiency, but you're trading that off for security, because then you can introduce things like race conditions and other vulnerabilities. There's always a trade-off. The old saying, right? Good, fast, and cheap, pick two. That's there for a reason. Okay? And then the other thing to keep in mind is that we have memory, and memory can effectively look like we have the physical memory and we have the virtual memory. Okay? So the physical memory, like I said, it's finite, it's fast, but it's limited. So we have things like virtual memory, which can use your disk space as well too. So those are things to keep in mind at this point in time. And then within the memory space itself, we have things like the stack and the heap. Stack being for like automatic function calls and quick things like if this, do that. It's loosely like you shouldn't have manual intervention, really. It's based off user interactions or if like basically conditions, right? And then we have the heap, which is more manually used and dynamic. Karina's asking, so who is in charge of the memory allocation for stack and heap? Stack is managed by the system, like the Windows kernel, the operating system itself, and the heap is more so by the programmer itself. That's the manual intervention. And this is where problems can occur. If the programmer has developed a program whereby a memory leak could occur, that's like a heap related memory, because the programmer is asking too much of the system. They're not terminating the memory after they open up a function and they close it, and then you get a memory leak, and that's how programs can continue to expand, and then they'll crash. The stack should have essentially no intervention. The computer handles that all for you. That's part of the operating system. It's part of the memory. It's part of the Windows kernel. Kim's saying, still don't really get why Windows is always using virtual memory, even when enough RAM is free. Developers. That's why. Because physical RAM is very finite. You have a very limited amount, so you want to be cautious and careful. And computers are pretty fast nowadays. That virtual memory is not really that much of an impact to you. But it's the developer. Yeah, definitely I'm a dev. It's true. Like the Windows development team and software developers who's made a program has decided, well, we're going to try to use virtual memory where possible so we don't overload the system. Now, I mean, if you're Google Chrome, not to throw shade, but I mean, if you're a Google Chrome developer, you don't care. You eat all of the memory. If you're an Adobe After Effects developer, you don't care. It literally uses all of your memory. So it's just a developer thing. Yeah, Zeno, so exploits are best coded in C. Correct. You want to get as low level in the code as possible. You want to be working with C and like assembly language, and as low as possible to get rid of all the overhead. You want to be as close to the process runtime as possible in the kernel, and you get that by working with like C and assembly. well beyond the scope of what you need to do. You do not need to know that for a SOC Analyst Tier 1 job. Honestly, you don't even need to start specializing that until like you're Tier 2 and up. Like, I mean, after Tier 2. Okay? Steven, when you were studying Java, you remember that stacks were things like local verbs? Yeah, correct. Exactly. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, exactly. What Karina's saying, where the languages you can control and allocate them. This is why like a language like C# is so popular, because it has a thing called garbage collection, and garbage collection is a feature that manages this for you. Same like, I mean, Java does a pretty decent job of it as well too. This is why these two languages blew up so much. C and C++ and these like lower level languages expect you to open and close memory on your own. Okay. I think that's a good start, like a good like high-level view. We'll kind of talk about these process threads of virtual memory, just so you understand what they are. And then we're going to go to lab now of Task Manager versus Process Explorer. And we're actually going to look at our first sysinternals tool. I think that might honestly be enough. And then we can dive into the rest next week. CI is saying that you really like that the program is targeted. It makes a big difference. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, like we're going to get you to be learning what you need and what you should kind of know, in our opinion. Because, yeah, like, yeah, I could throw a whole module in here about the stack and the heap and programming, but why, right? That's not needed at this level. You just need to generally understand that those things exist. So build the foundation, and we're going to come back to it later and build on it some more. Cool. Okay. I am going to go and fire up let's take a look at, so now we're at Task Manager versus Process Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fire up my Windows workstation. And while that's happening, I'm going to take a quick little like 3 to 5 minute beer back and top up a little bit. I need some tea. Tea is what I need, a lot of talking. Yeah, it does. Yeah. I'm not going to update it yet. That's because we rolled out a patch for email. You can update it though if you'd like, but I'm not going to update mine yet. That might be famous last words. Watch I start doing it. I'm like, oh, I should have updated. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay. All right. Back in action. Still too hot. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start off with our first sysinternals tool, and we're going to start developing out now our Windows Triage analysis skill set. And we're going to continue to layer on the knowledge and skills as we go. Okay. So the first thing we have is a tool called Process Explorer. So make sure you have your Windows workstation turned on, and if you're working in your own home lab, you can go and download the sysinternals toolkit. And we showed how to set that up actually in the earlier labs if you wanted to use like Chocolatey and manage it. But you can go and download it over here. Rogues Steven, thanks for the follow. Cool. So you can go ahead and download that if you'd like. Let this fire up in the meantime. So Process Explorer is essentially, if you want to think about it this way, is like Task Manager on steroids. That's what Process Explorer is like. It's like Task Manager went to the gym, got real jacked, and turned into Process Explorer. So I'm going to kind of show them side by side. If you hit the start button and you type in proc xp, kind of a shorthand for you to get there, you should see proc xp, which is Process Explorer. Let that load. So, right away, drastic difference, right? Looking at the two of these things. Just like side by side before it's even actually committed. Isn't that something? Jess Silva, thanks for the follow. So, yeah, I mean, I guess so, right? So, yeah, sure. Like, I could open this up. But even then, right? Significantly less details compared to something like Process Explorer. And that's by design. As we covered earlier in the course, right? Like, something like Task Manager is much more dedicated to just, like, simple interaction with processes, services, getting general details like resource consumption. You can see the executable, you can see the PID. There's a variety of things you can gather from here, but it's not enough. If we're security analysts, we really want to get under the hood. This is where we need to start being able to figure out what's actually happening on our system. So let's kind of look at this interface. The top over here, we can see some little timelines. We can see our CPU, our system commit, physical memory. We can see our system I/O. So like what's happening with our disk, network activity, and the disk itself as well too. And you can actually get a full hierarchical breakdown, nice and easy to work with, of all the various different types of binaries that are running on the system right now and this space and this time. So like, for example, if I were to go ahead and open up something like, I don't know, let's open up Firefox for a moment. There you go. So in this case, we can scroll all the way down, right? And we can see under the Explorer space over here, we can see Firefox itself has been opened. Now, take a look at this. Remember all those threads that we were talking about? Those like little individual workers? Incredibly important. Being able to see what is waiting, what's terminated, what's opening. We can see the wait reason by user request. An incredible amount of details. Whether we're living in user space, kernel space, the amount of time allocated to each. We can see the memory address space as well too. What's been committed for this thread to be working. And we haven't covered DLLs yet. We're going to talk about those a little bit later. As soon as that kind of loads in a moment. We're going to talk about DLLs probably next week at this point. But for now, we can see those threads that is actually happening inside here. Pretty cool. Now, if I wanted to go, I can maybe like double click this individual process over here. And if I were to go to something like disk and network, you can see right away, right? We can see the network IO, disk IO. We can see reads, writes, receive, and send. And this kind of level of detail is really important to get at a glance when we open up a process for inspection. Case in point, if we had a PowerShell process or a Notepad process that was running, and there was network activity coming out from it, but there was nothing running on that process, that's a problem, right? That doesn't make sense. This is where you can get something like process injection or a DLL injection happening, whereby something is loaded, a function is being called, we have the Windows API being hit in a way that it shouldn't be, and then we could have network activity and network-related events happening from a process that shouldn't have it. So you can inspect things like this. We have the disk and network tab itself to be able to determine, again, what is normal, what is not normal. We can also look at the general performance graph if we wanted a visual of something like that. We can take a look at the image-related contents of this actual process that's running. So we can see, like, where's the binary in disk, like, where was it called? Important. We can also get a virus total score, and we've covered a little bit of virus total already. So right from here under the hood, you can actually get that interaction, and you can actually submit it right then and there live, like I just did, which is making my browser angry. But we can then see the file itself that's been submitted to virus total for an inspection. Again, you don't have these types of functionalities or features inside of something like Task Manager. This is a very strong debugging, diagnostic, and security analysis tool for that reason. Now we can see all those threads. And you're going to learn over time what's going on with all these different thread calls. It's kind of overwhelming at first. But again, these are all those little workers. So kind of going back to the image over here, right? Like these little threads in this little factory, they're all doing these little things. You can actually inspect them here now, and you can monitor them and see what they're doing. Another handy tool is we can actually see a TCP/IP relationship with the service, with the process itself. So not only can we see network activity, but we can see the protocol. And if we took off the resolution, so get rid of DNS for a moment, we could actually even see local and remote addresses connected to this process. So if you were ever suspicious, I don't know, say you ran like a .doc, right? Like you downloaded a malicious attachment and it was an Excel file or like a Word document, and you executed and you ran it, and then you freaked out after because you didn't trust the sender and there was some type of macros code that executed. Well, if you pulled up the process of that Microsoft Word or Excel file and hopped inside of here of the TCP/IP tab, you might actually cache the foreign address, if there was one, for outbound network activity that could be acting sort of like a C2 command and control agent. That's super cool. You see the power of that, like right away? Like I can perform security analysis right away just from this lens, from this viewport. And so what are we looking for, right? Again, we're looking for what's normal, what's not normal. Another handy tab is you can pull up something like the security tab, and you can actually see the permissions that are built inside of this process and what they're enabled for. So if we scroll down and we see something like, I don't know, if we scroll down this, for example, and we see a privilege set for Firefox of SE impersonate privilege, we have a problem. You haven't come across this yet, but this is essentially allowing us to impersonate privileges from either another process or a runtime, or maybe like a runtime event, or another user, or another permission set on the system, and that's bad. So, like, for example, this is something you should typically always see disabled unless explicitly defined and developed by something you trust. Something like a Windows native system, like a Windows system process might be running something like this. But if you open up, again, that Microsoft Word document or Excel, and you see like SE impersonate privilege has been enabled, I can tell you right now that that document is probably going to try to get itself to an administrator or a system level account. Like, that's what that means. And that's the lens that you're going to develop in your security analysis triage skill set. And what does it start with? A little bit more reinforcement. It starts with understanding what these scopes are, what they're designed for and what they're not designed for. So when you see like an experienced SOC analyst where you'll get to, and they can handle incidents and events, you and that experienced SOC analyst will both be able to know how to pull up Process Explorer. But the difference in experience is going to be you being able to open up a process and looking immediately to determine what is normal, what's not normal, and where to follow a lead or a queue. That's really it. So in terms of getting over that hurdle, it's just going to be experience and exposure, which we're going to give you real soon. But the first step is just to learn how to work with this thing. So let's close that up. Let's take a look at some other things over here. So going back to this little like hierarchy type of view, we can see like Firefox is over here and we have like the parent and child. So like let's open up like PowerShell, for example. Now notice that when I opened up PowerShell, PowerShell actually opened up as a child of Explorer.exe. So this could be like an example of anything that runs at the GUI level that I'm executing from over here from Explorer.exe will create a child relationship with PowerShell.exe. And then you're going to start to get exposure to like what are these child processes that appear with individual child processes of another one. So you see like conhost over here, you can look this up. Again, do some inspection, what are the threads going on, and you'll learn as you get more experience going through these types of things. You could also actually I should show that too. But you could also get the strings of the binary. So this is essentially like ASCII like codes and characters that have been pulled apart from the binary, where you can see things. And this is where you can see things like certain Windows API calls. If I can kind of scroll down. So like. Where was I wanted to see, yeah, so like clear, right? Like you can see there's certain commands that you can pull apart from over here, and then a whole bunch of like unreadable junk. You can also get like version information. And these are, remember when I talked about going back to this process, right? The program is the static instructions on the disk. And then when we're executing it, right? When we're executing it, it turns into this pot. And everything's inside there. And it's a trusted space at this point in time. So what we're seeing in those static instructions is essentially then reflected into the executed process as a runtime process of the program. Rogue saying, yeah, extracted strings, I think some of them are from the exports. Maybe, yeah. You'll see them from exports. You'll see them just in headers as well, too. Again, these are any of the, like, the ASCII level readable text that after being compiled into the binary and then executed into runtime, carry into the process and can actually be read as ASCII characters from the process running itself. So you're going to have a bunch of things inside there. Yeah. So here's some calls. So PowerShell, like based off of the con host child process, we can see that it actually has the ability to call functions from like write file, open process, create pipe, exit. So if we wanted to inspect the capabilities or what this process is able to work with and call, we can get a glimpse from here. This is how you perform defer effectively. Ah, jeez. Sorry. Let's go back to that. Thanks, Karina. So going back to the strings itself, if I go over here, let's just do a search. Here you go. Here are a bunch of different types of function calls. And as you kind of scroll down, you can see, I don't even remember where it was at this point. Was it write file? Yeah, there you go. So write file, open process, create pipe, exit process. So these are some of these like Windows native API calls that it could call somewhere and do something with. Load library. You'll get exposed to these. So don't like crush yourself right away. Be like, I have no idea what this means. I'm never going to figure it out. That's fine. Just understand that Process Explorer, like I said, is Task Manager on steroids. It allows us to inspect full child-parent relationships. It allows us to get under the hood of running processes to determine what the threads are doing, the DLLs, file I/O, TCP/IP activity. Like I said, you could even see like a full resolution happening over here. And the strings themselves are after the static program has been compiled into a binary and then executed into a process. This is the final reflection of what's available for us to read from that given process as readable ASCII characters. And that can include from a lot of different sources, but it's been programmed at some point inside there and then finally reflected at the end. So this gives us an idea of what this process is capable of. So pretty cool. Now let's take a look. So yeah, now going back, like I said, so now going back to this like hierarchy, child-parent relationship kind of view over here at the top, this pane. Not only does it provide us an ability to kind of zoom in on a given process, it also allows us to figure out some general information of whether this is something trusted or not. So take a look. We have, whoops, sorry. So take a look, right? We have, like for example, like where is the auto start location in the registry? We can see where this actually lives for some of these processes. We can see the virus total score immediately. And if we want, we can go inside here and go to virustotal.com and we can check that or uncheck it. So right away, you can see if something is running after you've executed like Microsoft Word or Excel, and then all of a sudden you have like virus total score of like 3 popping up over here. Kind of weird. Not necessarily concerned, but something to inspect. There's that ASLR I was talking about a little bit earlier, where it can kind of like scramble the memory. That like it can kind of like scramble the memory location, so it's a little bit harder to work with in terms of memory injection attacks. We can see the verified signer. So like, was this verified and signed by Amazon? Remember when we talked about digital certificates? Well, here you go. I told you you're going to see them again. So some of these are verified by Microsoft. And some might not be. This one's verified by Mozilla. It's pretty cool. Now, something that's really handy is, I'm not sure if you can see this. If I hit spacebar, look kind of like where my mouse is over here in the bottom, right? See this paused? Let me know if you can see that. It's kind of small. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit. I actually never tried to zoom in and sing. Yeah, you guys can see it? I was going to actually try to change the resolution a little bit. I don't think I can I? On the VMs? You can see it? Okay. All right, never mind then. Don't worry about it. Come on, Windows, what are you doing? Let's try that again. Proc XP. Cool. Okay. So let's take a look for a moment. And let's kind of scroll back down to our space over here, right? And we look at Explorer, right? Okay. So if I go and I open up PowerShell, okay, swore I saw it there for a moment. Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right. Anyways, so if I open up PowerShell, what I want to show, I'm going to close up Edge. Just get that out of the way. Notice how it turned red. Okay. And if I close PowerShell right now, notice how it turns red as well. Now, if I open up PowerShell again, notice how it turns green. So if I hit spacebar, this is actually going to pause the entire viewport of what Process Explorer is able to see. Now I can go and I can close this, and nothing's happening. You can actually pause and get like a snapshot view of what's actually happening for full investigation. Now when I hit spacebar again, then it's going to catch up on the events that had happened when it was in pause mode. So this is really handy. If you're trying to figure out like C2 agent activity or beaconing or TCP/IP activity or file IO or thread activity, process activity, DL activity, like things that are intermittent coming and going, it's amazing. You can just hit spacebar. You can actually pause this, and then this is where you can catch things happening that may be a little bit difficult to observe. Yeah, you can also save it to a file as well too. So, pretty cool. Now, one last thing we want to cover for the day over here is actually I think the last thing we want to cover was actually looking at a multi-threaded application, right? So 1 second. Double check where in the lab that was. Oh no, this is not it. Actually, sorry. You can ignore that. Okay, so back in SOC 100-1, because we're wrapping up now. So that's actually here. Sorry. I was going to pull this up, but we're not going to have time for that today. So next week, that's a decent spot to stop. I'd like to continue, but it's already been 4 hours. So next week, what we're going to do is actually start using this tool. We got a little bit more lecture to cover and actually walk through the birth and life cycle of a process. Kind of talking like the instantiation, the eProcess object, and sort of some of the attributes, the properties of what that looks like. E-threads as well too. So there's a lot to cover in there. We're also going to talk about the executables, the DLLs and threads in a little bit of deeper depth. And then we're going to do an inspection of multi-threaded applications happening in action. And then we're going to get a little bit deeper over the registry as well. And then we're going to start talking about like process events, which is super, super handy, because we're going to look at another tool called Procmon, or Process Monitor. And effectively, what's happening inside of this viewport over here of all these running processes is also reflective of a lot of actual events happening in real time. Oh, interesting. Let's just reset that. Cool. So under the hood, like what you're seeing inside of Process Explorer is actually a visual representation of the properties or the attributes or components, I should say, of what the process object actually looks like. So next week, we're going to talk about the eProcess data structure and how that kind of resides in kernel space and what we're visibly able to see within inside of Process Explorer. And then we're going to look at how all these events are captured during process activity as a historical record for us to do further forensics and find out what's actually going on an endpoint. Like if I were to go and open up another process of Edge, this thing's just going to keep on going. Like there's so much to capture over here. So we're going to dive into that next week as well. This is the beginning of your security triage skill set developing. You're going to be staring at a lot of Process Explorer, Procmon, and auto runs for the rest of this module. It's about to get real. Yeah, Rogues, Steven, Procmon's amazing. I love it. Cool. So you all ready to start developing your security chops next week? That's a real question. Hell yeah. That's a wrap for the day, I think. Good coverage today. Covered a lot of good ground. Yeah, lunchtime, break time for the day. Cool. So Abe's saying malware analysts are paid close to 6 figs in the US. I feel like they're paid more than that, man. Because like to be a malware analyst, you're definitely quite advanced. Cryosun, so seeing MS Edge running is suspicious. It's usually never. You got to know normal and look for abnormal. So in that case, yeah. If your users are never running MS Edge, but then all of a sudden it starts getting executed, who uses Edge, right? It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Yeah, Abbey 134 grand. Yep. Cool. Well, that's all we got for this week. It runs in background anyway. Might have other responsibilities. The name does tend to cause blood to boil. Yeah. At least it's not iExplorer, okay? At least, thank God, we're not seeing iExplorer running around in the background anymore. Trinity found this really interesting. Awesome, yeah. Tier 3 SOC Analysts, yeah, 125,000, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can see why, right? Like, look how much we've covered, and we're just starting to learn Tier 1 triage skills. Like, just starting. So we're going to keep on doing that with SOC 100. We're going to get you through your Tier 1 analyst skill set. Ariel, thank you. Yeah. I think that's a wrap for the weekend, everyone. So, yeah. Once again, thanks for being here. Thank everyone for spending your Sunday over here with Level Effect and going through the SOC 100 course. Thanks for good questions, good engagement, and continued support. Again, we wouldn't be doing this without all of you being here, and I think we're all having a blast doing it. So thanks again. Hope you're all learning a lot, taking a lot in. It's just going to keep getting more fun from here on out. Get ready for next weekend, and I think we're actually going to start looking at some malware. I've cooked up a couple ones for you all in SOC 100. Net and butt time is a fun one. So we're going to look at some binaries, some malicious ones that we put together for you, where you can actually see malicious threat actor patterns in action. And we're going to use Process Explorer and these related sysinternal tools to be able to identify and triage and remediate the endpoint. So that's what's coming next week. Until then, have yourselves an awesome week, and we'll see you next Saturday. Have a good one.